had a situation where I was listening to John Pinar's politics show and was watching the food fight, for lack of a better word, and the total lack of professionalism. They had a Labour MP, a Tory MP, and a Lib Dem MP. And it was almost as if they were, and I happened to have listened to PMQs yesterday, as if they were on the floor of the House, catcalling each other from across the hall, absolutely ridiculously so. That we had the statement from the Chancellor on the budget, the autumn budget statement. And there is a now, and I've not seen this before, acceptable level of absolute, what is it, mistrust and misbehavior that seems to be standard. Whenever a commentator, and Phil, you having been on the BBC know this, asks a question, you never get an answer. You get a talking
Yeah.
point. And then that talking point is ridiculed by the opposition sitting in there. And what actually spurred this on was last week on Thursday, our local weekly newspaper, The Gem, had a story, a really horrific story, about a 2 hour delay in an NHS ambulance getting to somebody who was suffering from a stroke. And what happened, though, was that the local MP, it happened to be a Tory, was in this woman's home for a photo op with the story. And I asked a few people as I showed them, I said, what do you think about that? And everybody went, oh, no, wait, that's just wrong.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
just
Yeah.
not right. So I know Phil over at the Gem here, or Phil Irwin, who's the editor, and I jotted off a quick little 5 or 6 paragraph. And I said, Phil, use it either as a letter to the editor or as an article. It turns out he used it as an article. To say, this is just not every moment calls for politics and what's wrong with the discourse, because I later expanded that into the Monday line on UK Progressive. We seem to be putting into political office a generation of mean girls or mean boys, and that's all they seem to do is snark at each other. And when I go on Sharp End with Adrian or some of the others in some of these programs, there's usually a Tory and there's usually a Labour MP, and all they do is throw spitballs at each other for 30 minutes.
Well, it's interesting you see that. I mean, I can give the sort of media input into
Please do.
that, and the being out of kind of mainstream established media. I actually want to hear the answers.
Yeah.
I want to hear what people say, but I know because I've been there myself, 23 years in the BBC, and I know it was about the questions. It was about how bad you could how difficult you could make the questions. And the answers were neither here nor there. I mean, you should listen to the answers, and I did try and listen to the answers, but I actually now want to hear what people say and what politicians say. And I mean, a lot of the time, I think actually it's the media's fault to a large extent that they won't allow, discourse, and they won't allow ideas to be floated, and to obviously challenge the ideas, argue against them and all the rest of it. But that is not a good thing. They don't like that. And the other thing that gets me is that news items are so incredibly short and getting shorter. When I started, it was like 2.5 minutes on a news item in the evening news. It's now about 1.5, and it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So the whole idea of ideas and political discourse, is just doesn't reach the ears of the public because it's not seen as media important.
An issue around the kind of soundbite culture that we live in, and maybe it goes right back to the emergence of 24-hour rolling news, where a soundbite is made and then it's put on a loop and repeated again. So if you watch 24-hour rolling news for any length of time, say an hour, you'll just get a revolving door of the same kind of sound bites over and over again. So therefore, politicians have kind of maneuvered the way that they talk about their arguments to fit that 24-hour cycle. And I think what's really interesting is when you get a moment when the facade drops. That's when you really get a little bit of insight. You get in between. So, for example, there's a fantastic moment when the Tory public relations slipped around this guy, Mark Garnier, the Conservative MP for Wyre Forest. So he was unknowingly recorded at the Institute of Economic Affairs think tank. And he said he was talking about, we don't want to attract a few dog-end voters in the outlying regions of the country. And it was really interesting how that sort of summed up the real, Westminster elite conservative attitudes from the southeast. He thought he wasn't being recorded.
A similar one to that was when Gordon Brown, during the last election, was recorded. He didn't realise it was being recorded after his was harangued by this woman, and he called her a bigot. And it was a great insight into when the facade drops, as you say. What happens when all the politicking goes. And you actually can see the real person. You can see the real discourse. You can see the real ideas at stake. And the other thing that gets me as well, I know I keep banging on about this, but, the media has a big role to play in this. And current affairs journalism is very important, and yet is not, it doesn't make money. Okay, so First Tuesday, World in Action, TVI, they've all gone on British television. They've all gone. We have Panorama, which is still there, but a shadow of its former self, I think, frankly. And these are the areas, current affairs are the areas where you would hear, normally, political discourse, political ideas and all the rest of it, challenged and all the rest of it. But the bottom line is, they are expensive and they don't make money. You don't get huge viewing figures for these things.
Well, we just had a situation in the US where Meet the Press, the longest running broadcast of political discussion, started back in the 40s, for crying out loud, fired, justifiably so, their tool anchor, a man by the name of David Gregory. Now, David Gregory is replaced by Chuck Todd, and of course everybody is saying to Chuck, don't let these people come on and just do their talking points. You need to challenge them. So what does he do as soon as he gets the gig? He comes out with a tweet and says, it's not my job to challenge them, it's just my job to report. And I see this so many times. When I used to be on the politics show here with our mutual friend over there in Cardiff Bay, I actually said something because I was the only guest that time. And they said, well, thanks for that, Dennis. I now have to bring labor on so they can have equal time. I'm like, wait a minute. It's not about equal time if you're just going to come on and spew rubbish.
Yeah, exactly.
Equal time,
exactly.
These people cannot be allowed to just come in. It's like the what we saw with John Oliver and the climate debate, where he had 97 climate scientists come out on stage and 3 deniers. Just because somebody has an opinion, they don't deserve equal time to express that opinion.
But I was very good to you on the telly, wasn't I, Dennis?
You were always good. We were very simpatico because it was always, you'd ask a question and you know what? You'd actually get a real answer. So...
But it's similar to what you were just saying there, Dennis. The interview of Darren Wilson, the Ferguson cop, has been highly criticised on the interview he had on the ABC channel. First of all, because he was paid an awful lot,
$100,000.
Yeah, exactly. And then it was seen as an absolute softball PR exercise in making him look like he was the victim.
Do you know what PR professionals call those particular interviews? Right? They call them blowjobs. Because that's what they are, basically. Oh, I'm so sorry, Darren, that you managed to hurt your wrists wrestling with this boy. But where's the question saying, why did you then go back to the station, clean your hands and clean your gun, eliminating all physical evidence of what actually happened? It was, don't get me started.
Yeah, you need questioning like that. I'd like to think I used to do questioning, and I still do questioning like that. But you see it less and less now, frankly.
It's terrible. You say anything you want at any point in time, and that's just not right.
Yeah.
Going back to the Prime Minister's questions yesterday, I watched it as well, and I was absolutely taken aback at the juvenile level of personal insults. Back to the sort of Ed Miliband eating a bacon sandwich, and these silly little jokes that they put in. I think it goes back to the sort of public school mentality. The huge percentage of our politicians that are public school educated, or what in America would be privately educated. And there's that sort of fraternity aspect to the whole debate, which is just absolutely a turn-off. Punch and Judy would be absolutely disgraced by the level of discourse.